What if the most important part of this entire situation isn't the photos themselves, but the moment they chose to appear? Because images don't exist in a vacuum. They surface inside timing, context, and intent. And when timing feels deliberate, people start asking questions that have nothing to do with fashion, luxury, or even celebrity, and everything to do with control. January 2026 arrives quietly, and then suddenly it doesn't. A handful of images begin circulating online, and within hours, something shifts. Not outrage, not shock, recognition. The kind that makes people stop scrolling and look again. These aren't recycled screenshots or grainy stills pulled from old forums. They're clean, crisp, unmistakably new to the public eye. And that alone changes the conversation. What many are now questioning isn't whether a public figure once moved through elite social spaces. That part isn't unusual. The question is why these particular moments, from this particular chapter, are emerging now, years after they were taken, and at a time when the public story has been carefully reframed around reinvention, authenticity, and forward motion. Because here's the thing people are noticing. When the past resurfaces without explanation, it doesn't rewrite history, it complicates it. Let's be clear about what is actually confirmed. New photographs surfaced in early 2026 showing Meghan Markle at private yacht gatherings in Monaco and Mediterranean locations during her pre-royal years. The images appear authentic. They are not ambiguous, not blurred, not speculative lookalikes. They spread rapidly across social platforms and became a major topic of online discussion. At the time of their circulation, no public statement was issued to provide context or explanation. That's the factual ground. Everything else lives in reaction, interpretation, and speculation, and those must be treated carefully. Public reaction didn't follow a single emotional track. Some people dismissed the images immediately, asking why anyone should care about social events from more than a decade ago. Others felt something more subtle, a sense that these photos didn't align neatly with the story they'd been hearing for years. Not because the images were scandalous, but because they suggested familiarity with spaces that operate on invitation, discretion, and long-term relationships. And that's where curiosity deepened. Because luxury itself isn't rare in celebrity culture. Access is. Private yacht environments, especially those frequented by international business figures and global elites, don't function like open parties. They're curated. Guests are selected. Introductions matter. Someone always vouches. So when people look at these images, they aren't asking, why was she there? They're asking, who brought her in? That question doesn't imply wrongdoing. It implies structure. And structure is something the public is increasingly trained to notice. Now, instead of walking forward through her early career in a neat timeline, let's jump ahead to a different moment, years later, when Meghan enters royal and global philanthropic spaces with ease. By that point, she's clearly comfortable navigating rooms filled with influence. That comfort doesn't appear overnight. It's learned, practiced, refined. Many are now re-evaluating whether those skills were developed earlier than previously acknowledged. This is where interpretation begins, and it must be labeled clearly. Some observers believe these newly surfaced images point to a period of intentional relationship building long before global attention arrived. Not accidental proximity. Not chance encounters, but repeated exposure to high-level environments where social intelligence matters as much as professional talent. That interpretation doesn't assign motive. It doesn't accuse. It simply reframes ambition as something methodical rather than spontaneous. And that reframing is what makes people uneasy. Because the dominant narrative for years has emphasized struggle, perseverance, and breakthrough. A self-directed climb. A story many people relate to. But when images suggest invisible scaffolding, connections formed quietly, introductions made off-camera, it forces a more complex picture to emerge. Complexity isn't a flaw, but it does challenge simplicity. Another thing people are noticing is the silence. In today's media ecosystem, silence is rarely neutral, especially when clarification would be easy. A single statement providing context, who hosted, why she was there, how the invitations came about, could have shifted the conversation dramatically. Instead, nothing. And when there's no explanation, speculation fills the space. So let's talk about speculation responsibly. Some insiders familiar with elite social environments believe these photos didn't surface by accident. Images from private collections usually remain private indefinitely. When they don't, it's because discretion has been withdrawn. And discretion is rarely withdrawn without reason. That doesn't mean hostility. Sometimes it means distance. Sometimes it means a desire to separate from someone whose public narrative no longer aligns with shared experience. And sometimes, it simply means someone decided they no longer had an obligation to stay quiet. The timing intensifies those questions. This leak didn't occur during peak royal controversy. It didn't arrive amid tabloid frenzy. It appeared during a period of rebranding, new projects, new messaging, a renewed emphasis on relatability and transparency. That's not coincidence people ignore. If these images had surfaced years ago, they might have blended into the noise. But now, they collide with a carefully curated present. And that collision creates friction. It also raises a broader cultural issue, the tension between public storytelling and private history. Every public figure curates. That's not unique. What's different now is the public's increasing ability to detect omissions. People don't necessarily demand full disclosure, but they do react strongly when gaps feel intentional. And this gap feels intentional to many. So here are the questions circulating, not accusations, but questions grounded in curiosity. How did access to those environments first occur? Who facilitated introductions into circles that prioritize trust and continuity? What did those relationships look like over time? And why has this chapter remained largely unaddressed in public storytelling? These questions matter not because of judgment, but because they speak to credibility. Another layer that's drawing attention is how long these images were kept out of public view. That suggests they were protected, which means someone, at some point, chose not to release them. And now, someone has chosen differently. That shift alone tells a story. There's also a growing conversation about power literacy, the ability to recognize how influence actually moves through the world. Not through talent alone, not through luck alone, but through proximity, trust, and reputation. Many people are now reassessing whether Meghan's rise should be viewed through that lens. That doesn't diminish achievement. It contextualizes it. But context can be threatening to brands built on simplicity. And then there's the matter of response strategy. Silence can mean many things. It can mean dismissal. It can mean legal caution. It can mean uncertainty about how much to reveal without inviting deeper scrutiny. But what silence rarely does is end a conversation. If anything, it extends it. People now wonder whether this is the end of the story or the beginning of a slow release. Historically, when material like this surfaces, it often arrives in stages. One release tests reaction. Another confirms interest. A third reframes understanding entirely. That may not happen here. But the possibility alone keeps attention focused. What complicates matters further is the nature of the environments shown in the photos. Elite international circles value discretion above all else. If those norms are no longer being applied, it suggests relationships have cooled, boundaries have shifted, or loyalties have changed. That's not personal drama. That's social mechanics. And social mechanics don't care about branding timelines. So where does that leave things now? It leaves a narrative in flux. On one side, there's a forward-facing image built around renewal, authenticity, and personal growth. On the other, there's a resurfacing chapter that hasn't been fully integrated into that story. The tension between those two realities is what people are reacting to, not the images themselves. And this isn't about demanding explanations for the sake of spectacle. It's about coherence. Audiences today are sophisticated. They don't expect perfection, but they do expect consistency. When consistency breaks, trust becomes conditional. This situation also highlights something broader about modern celebrity culture. The era of controlling every aspect of one's narrative is ending. Private archives exist. Screenshots exist. Memories exist. And when those elements re-emerge, they don't ask permission. They simply appear. The question now isn't whether these photos change everything. They don't. But they do change something more subtle, the margin of doubt. They remind the public that no story is ever as clean as it appears. That success often involves unseen networks, and that when those networks decide to speak, directly or indirectly, the conversation shifts whether anyone wants it to or not. So what happens next depends on choice. Silence allows speculation to harden. Context allows nuance to breathe. Neither option is risk-free. But one thing is clear: these images have reopened a chapter that many assumed was closed. And once reopened, chapters rarely close the same way again. In the end, this isn't a story about yachts or photos or even fame. It's about narrative authority: who holds it, how long they hold it, and what happens when it slips. And right now, that authority is being quietly, unmistakably questioned.